Welcome to Outer Space, International Arts and Class Struggle Podcast.
In this show, can the cultural workers of the world unite? An interview with Clara Paillard. As usual, commentary with Paul Paranoid. And this week, a song by Claire Laker-Mansfield called Bread and Roses. Hello, my name is Rob McDonald, and I'm the host of Outer Space International Arts and Class Struggle podcast. And today we have a very important guest. We have Clara Paillard, the president of the culture sector of the PCS Union in the UK. Hi, Clara, how are you doing? Did I pronounce your second name right?
Hi, Rob. Yes, I'll let you off with that. No worries.
Okay, thank you very much. So, first of all, Clara, could you explain what your position in the trade union is and what your trade union, who do you represent?
Okay, well, first of all, I'm a PCS rep at National Museums Liverpool. I am the branch secretary there, but also I am the president of the culture group in PCS, as you explained before. We represent about 4,000 museum, heritage and cultural workers in the UK, in England, Scotland and Wales. Some of the institutions we represent workers in are like the Tate, National Gallery, the British Museum, but also National Museums of Scotland, Liverpool or Wales. We also represent workers in the private sectors in those institutions, because many of them have been outsourced or privatized in the last 10 years. So many people working in our cafes and shops or in security often work for private companies. So we try to bring unity into all those museum workers.
Okay, great. So you represent arts and cultural workers who work in museums and those kind of places. Okay, so we've invited you on the show today because, well, first of all, there's a massive crisis facing cultural workers at the moment. There's huge cutbacks happening from the COVID and the economic crisis that has followed it. And we've covered this on our podcast before. And it's obviously a massive problem. And there needs to be, a big fight back against this. But we've invited you on the show because your union has made today an important declaration, and more importantly, you haven't just done it from yourselves from the UK and the workers that you represent. Importantly, I think you've done it in conjunction with unions in France and in Italy, and therefore you're making an international declaration. I wonder if you could explain to our listeners, firstly, who are the other unions you're working with and what is the declaration about?
Yes, well, I think that the arts and culture sectors have been under attack for not just with the COVID crisis, but prior to this, austerity politics that happened in the UK, but also in many other countries in Europe. And so we have tried to link up with other museum workers outside this country, in France, in Italy, Spain, and others, because quite often the problem we face are similar. And so this particular time, we've worked with the CGT, the General Confederation of Work, Labour, who represent museum workers in France, and with the CGIL, Confederazione Generale Labori, similarly representing museum and heritage workers in Italy, because we felt that the problem we are facing right now with redundancies due to the COVID crisis, but also precarious work in our cultural institutions, low pay, fixed term contract, privatizations, is happening all over the place. So why be stuck in our country when we can link up? It is important that it's not just the top of the unions linking up internationally, but also actual workers on the ground who are organizing the campaigns and the resistance from an activist perspective. So I'm so pleased that we've been able to join forces to denounce a number of things. First of all, the disproportionate impact of the COVID crisis on our sector. It's going very fast and very hard. Immediately with the lockdown in March, a number of cultural places, museums, but also artists and freelancers have found themselves either closed or not having any work. It's true across not just museums and galleries, by the way, but for theaters, music halls, everywhere is been no activity. So we have put together this declaration, and hopefully people can go and check it online, because we feel that it is time to rethink the approach to the arts and culture sector. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is very specific in saying that access to arts and culture should be for all and not the few. And currently, the capitalist, commercialized model of delivering culture is increasingly invading all areas of the arts. In museums where I work, for example, the shift is clearly towards commercial income. So our museum and galleries are being used and utilized to generate profits with, champagne and canapes amongst the artworks at nighttime. And we don't feel this is what we are here for. We want to deliver a public service.
Yes, I think that's really good to hear, especially from a trade union, that actually there is a major problem in terms of, I think, what you call cultural consumerism in the declaration. That actually the logic of capitalism in the arts in general, it doesn't make any sense. Art is not something to be bought and sold. Art is life. And one of the things we talk about a lot in this podcast is that very issue, the actual importance, of art in people's lives, in their daily routines. You also talk a bit about in the declaration, and it will be in the information below, so everybody will be able to read it. And you talk about the COVID effects, and I think everybody knows that it's been an extraordinary year and that things have changed. And obviously, people going out and all those things have been affected. But the logic of capitalism in a crisis like this is to shut things down. And when we need the art workers to be there and the art institutions to be there after this crisis goes, because obviously this is not going to be the world forever. And so one of the questions I really wanted to put to you was, you talk about the problems of past choices, because it's not just about the COVID crisis of now, it's about the past choices in the arts. So you raise that as an important thing. What do you really mean by that? What do you mean by the past choices of governments have made, or budget cuts, or of privatization? What are you getting at when you raise that point?
Yeah, I think that definitely in the past 10 years, the art and culture sector have become a money-making, industry. This is not just new. We see that arts and culture is being sold across the world. It's the Disneyfication of art and culture, where rather than being a tool for education, personal pleasure or development, sharing values and communication between communities, increasingly there is pressure on the sector to deliver commercial outcomes, as they say. and it's about selling tickets. It's about charging schools for visiting our cultural institutions. It is about how we can sell the brand of an institution. And the packages that the rescue package that was announced by the government in June, which was, significant 1.5 billion. What we see is this is not about rescuing the culture and the arts. It's about rescuing institutions and commercial organizations. For who exactly? Workers are actually suffering, losing their jobs as we speak now in many institutions, like the Tates, hundreds of workers have been affected. The South Bank Center won't be reopening till next year. And again, hundreds of people have been made redundant. And it's happening across National Opera, National Theatre, recently the Royal Academy. And it starts in London, where institutions are more commercialized, but it's now expanding across the country. And we need to unite our forces to challenge that model and demand something different from our cultural policies. So this is why the declaration have got a series of demands for cultural democracy.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that. So what do you mean by, I think you used the words democratic access to the arts, and access is one of the key questions, particularly for working class people. Access to the art is a critical thing because we don't necessarily have the time, the money and the resources for art. So, you raised that question. I think it's important. So please explain a bit more.
If you look at the history of the production of arts and culture, it's been a privileged area. Often the kings and the riches were the one able to have time to engage with arts and culture, but also to commission artists. And many artists have been reliant on the rich and the greats. Many museums have built their collections on donation from people who have either contributed to loot artifacts from across the world, or have been able to invest huge amount of money to purchase those type of artworks. But actually, art and culture is far more than what is produced in this way and displayed in our, great institutions. And during the COVID crisis, what we've seen is a flurry of activities online around creativity and production. People have taken up drawing, modeling, singing. We've seen amazing, production from many working class people.
Some artists have taken up even doing the art of podcasting.
As well. I think there's a number of new industries. The creativity of young people online, is absolutely incredible. And I keep being baffled and discovering, culture of zines and, it's something that is close to our art. And as the pandemic is continuing, but society did reopen to an extent. I think it is really important that public money is actually invested in this sector to promote this creativity and for people to engage with the art, because this is not just for the sake of it, for people's pleasures. It's also actually on an economic argument where it's well known that in the last 20 years, each pound invested in public arts and culture is actually generating huge, benefits for the economy in a capitalist society. But also the impact on health has been proven, where it is beneficial for us and for our mental health to be able to engage with creative activities, learn about our history.
So so in this declaration, you're not just talking about fighting and saving jobs that are going, which is critical, and obviously is the first concern, of the union. You're actually talking about the broader question of the defence of the arts, and I think that's actually very, very important. And I think the day-to-day life and activities and even the understanding of art being an important part of the day-to-day of everybody's life. So that's great. And I fully support what you're saying. When you come down to read in the declaration, you talk about a constructive resistance. And I'm kind of interested, what are your demands and program? How are you thinking of building this resistance? Because it strikes me that a union like yourself is a lot stronger than a handful of artists, just one or two here and there. And we need to build unity in this struggle. But you're not just doing it in England, as we said, you're doing it in France and you're doing it in Italy. And I'm kind of interested, what kind of program are you putting forward for this struggle?
Well, I think we've got to be clear, we are trade unions, and therefore we do represent workers, and we want to have workers' voice heard. So, some of our priorities are around ending precarious work and social dumping, privatization and the shameless exploitation of employees, mainly in outsourced companies. But really, what we believe as well is that we need to engage outside the realm of just trade unions, workers. And the PCS Culture Group have a long track record on working not with just other unions in the UK and abroad, but also with campaign groups and artist collectives, and how we can sort of link up our struggles. So, I'll just give you an example, Rob. We've been campaigning a long time in museums and gallery to have proper measures to tackle the climate crisis in our sector. And as we do so, we've been working with a group like BP or Not BP. We've been fighting the sponsoring of museums and galleries by oil companies. And interestingly, this is also an international struggle because as BP sponsored the British Museum, Total used to sponsor the Louvre in Paris, and this is not a coincidence. Is those corporations, not just oil companies, there are others, arm companies, and there used to be tobacco companies, are trying to have an influence and use the sort of prestige of those public cultural institutions to wash their names of any attacks on their ethics. So we also work with groups like Movement for Cultural Democracy on really this program is not just about workers deciding where we should go. It's about engaging with communities, reclaiming those cultural spaces to give a voice to those who are unheard, like working class people, or it may be people who identify as of color, women, and disabled people who often are not represented within the workforce of cultural institutions, but also are often less visiting those places because they don't really resonate in or have any meanings for what they relate to, because of the way culture is produced. So I think we haven't got, and we don't claim to have all the solutions. This call is about opening further dialogue. And actually in PCS Culture Group, we are planning to have series of conversation to develop the different themes. We hope to produce further joint declarations over the next 12 months on different themes and areas. And we also hope to bring other unions on board across Europe. So we'll be presenting our declaration to the European Federation of Trade Union, EPSU, on Thursday, building from there. So watch this space because this is only a start. And to be honest, it's been quite difficult because, we all communicating in 3 different languages to start with. And, how do we overcome those barriers at grassroots levels? Because this is not necessarily simple.
Yeah,
and,
I think I think this is really key, though. I mean, first of all, it's interesting. You're a union rep in England. You're French. I'm in Barcelona. I'm English. We're talking about unity. The truth is, in this day and age, capitalism is international in its exploitation, and we have to be international in our response. And I think it's very important what you mentioned. I think it's really critical that as these three unions joining up in the austerity fight of a number of years ago, there was actually, a partial European general strike, particularly in Southern Europe, and it was a critical part of that struggle. And I think in this early fight that we're entering into now, which is basically a second wave of not the coronavirus, a second wave of austerity and attacks from the capitalist system on all jobs and services, but particularly, obviously, the first often is the arts. And I find it, obviously very good. So your plan is to approach other trade unions in other countries, I presume, not just in Europe, hopefully beyond that, yeah? And I was particularly inspired to hear that you want to work with other groups of collectives and, I guess, artists individually and campaigns, because it strikes me that this is going to be a huge fight, across all sectors of industry and all sectors of society. And the one thing that we need is an alternative, to the cuts they're going to say. They're going to say, oh, well, we haven't got people coming to the museum, we have to cut your job. In the same way, there's going to be job cuts in every sector that's existing. So this idea of building a unity of everybody, it seems to me to be really important. And the fact that you're significant trade unions, you're kind of, the way I see it, and maybe you tell me if I'm wrong, you're kind of presenting to everybody right now, here's a backbone to this struggle. Because at the moment we've been left and they've been cutting us one by one. They've been attacking us one by one. Artists like me have lost lots of work, individually. And it seems to me that you're making this general call to start with, but, maybe it's like, sort of cultural workers of the world unite kind of declaration that let's pull together and that maybe could win. Am I reading that correct? Is that the kind of direction that you're hoping for from this?
Absolutely. And I think this is building on some years of work with those other groups, as you said. And we've already worked with those trade unions around particular disputes. 5 years ago, the National Gallery, we got great international solidarities, but it can't just be, as and when. We need to develop this alternative. Yes. And I think what COVID had demonstrated is that capitalism is failing. I mean, we knew that, but I think COVID demonstrated once again. And even the capitalists have been obliged to actually argue for massive state intervention. The problem is they want to save themselves and their corporations and the wealthy, and that's why they've been forced to do so, because COVID hasn't discriminated. So it is about, as you said, an alternative. What is the alternative? Yeah. For us, we're building it in the arts and culture sector, but obviously we also link up with many other struggles of workers and communities across the world. So this is not just about arts and culture. We do mention in the declaration the issue of climate change, ecocides, because whatever we build needs to be sustainable and need to come from a participatory process. So we hope, as I said, over the next 6 to 12 months to carry on these conversations, develop more detailed programs and demands, but also to figure it out, where do we put them? How do we make them happen? Because clearly what's happening now is we're not being listened by government politicians, and we are facing a number of dangers with the rise of fascism. Climate change is happening. And I do believe that this campaign, to its degree, around arts and culture can actually help generate this bigger alternative we need and be part of a wider struggle.
That sounds great. I mean, one of the things this podcast often talks about is turning the artist towards the workers' movement and the workers' movement towards the artist, because artists generally have a lot of creativity about how we can build the struggle, but we often act alone, and the workers' movement often acts as a unity, but it's often a bit stale and boring, about the approach. And I think the merging of the two forces in society that can put together a program and a strategy to actually fight sounds excellent. So just to wind up, I'm going to put your statement in the details under the podcast, but I'm kind of hoping that this is the beginning of a united fight back in the arts. You're not just on one question, on all the questions, and it's going to build serious solidarity. Maybe it's a bit early at this stage, but how would people potentially get involved in something? Or do you see that it's going to evolve into a more of a broader campaign in the countries? How do you think that linking up will happen? Because I think this is a really important question, because a declaration is a piece of paper in the end of the day, and it could say whatever we want it to say. What I'm really interested in is, how do we build this fight? How do I go to the artist I know in Barcelona and say, hey, have you heard about this? Or, obviously the podcasts have put it out. We want to say to everybody we've got connections with, this is the backbone, or this is the beginning of the struggle. How could people, do you think, at this stage, what do you think they should be doing to prepare for this battle that's coming, or is already happening? But how do you think we could what should we be saying to people now, to prepare? Can they sign up for the declaration, or should they be building groups in their area? What would your advice be at this stage?
Okay, well, I think that's a good one. Obviously, I see this as a stone into building something bigger, but this has already started, and people are networking all over the place. So This declaration doesn't claim to be the, initiative that is gonna unite everybody. I have to say that I didn't think about getting people to sign up to the declaration, because it is a trade union declaration, so it's really
Maybe I'm jumping a little ahead. I'm thinking, what do I do now? I can put the podcast out, but how do I get involved? How do I argue? How do I put an input into this? How do we take it one stage further? Because one of the problems I find with the struggle on the left and in the trade union movement is there's often a load of good ideas, but we talk about participation in art, but we have to also talk about how the participation of the movement develops. How do we get people on the ground in on something? And I think what you're doing is fantastic, because you're creating the first step towards a backbone. The trade union should be central to this struggle, but the communities, the individual artists, all these things, it's about what focuses my mind is, okay, we need to build a strategy. We need input from everybody. I think we'll find very quickly a common program, especially if you're raising the logic of capitalism being central to the problem. I think people will really respond to that. The question really has to be, okay, so what stage 2? Because I can hear people when they're reading this thinking, oh, great declaration. Yeah, I agree with that. I'll tick. And then they go back and they've lost their job, and I know that a lot of the struggles will be in the local areas. So, I think that's what maybe there's steps beyond is what you're referring to potentially.
Well, what I would say to people who may be listening to the show is, if you are an artist or a worker in the cultural sector, do find out about trade union in your workplace or in your area, and join if you're not a member. If you're a member, I think you need to start getting more involved and asking questions and trying to link up with people in your trade union, but also in your communities, and start questioning what is going on with all, this venue closing and artists not being able to work. There may be local struggles in your area. Find out about them and go and support them. You may not be able to support them physically, and fortunately, there is a lot happening online at the moment. So if it's about sending message of solidarity, participating to online actions, starting to follow some of those activities. Obviously, if anybody have got ideas or questions, you can get in touch with the PCS Culture Group. We are on Twitter at PCS Culture Group. We are also on Facebook. not on Instagram yet, but a number of our branches are. So don't hesitate to get in touch with us or with myself at Clara Paillard on Twitter to follow things up. And maybe our next step will be to also provide a bit of a mapping of all those activities and activisms that are taking place, because believe me, there is so much out there. I'm surely I am not the person that can tell you, how we all unite, but definitely.
Well, I think it's I think it's exceptionally important that the networking, the building, the knowledge, first of all, that what's going on, then the knowledge, then the networking, then the solidarity movements, then we're building programs, then we're communicating, then we're building an argument, and we're building a force in society that's arguing for something. And this is why I think what you're doing is important, because you have resources. I mean, all right, you're not super huge unions and whatever, but 3 unions together, let's take that to 10. Let's spread that to other places. And I think if that's what's going to happen here, this for me is I can hear the trumpet blowing. Let's put the forces together and let's fight for arts and culture for about time, because as far as I see it, we're the first to be attacked. We're the first to be cut. And we're always like kind of forgotten. Well, you can cut the arts. You've got to keep this running. You've got to keep the hospital running. Of course you have. But the arts, they can be cut. And we've had that for 20, 30 years. My whole artistic life has been one of chasing cuts. So
yes. And I think, Rob, most important of all is through art, we can go beyond divisions and differences. And right now, this is hugely important, because the society is being more and more polarized. Any dialogue and debate we've seen around Brexit, we see it around COVID or climate change, become so polarized, and people not listening to each other, not at each other. We need absolutely to be able to tackle that grave danger, because this is the rise of fascism. And I think that this is a mission that we need to have as artistic people and people working in the cultural areas, because, I think you're right. Arts allow you to see the other in a positive way and a way that can surprise us. So let's get on board, and I welcome ideas, inputs. I think it's through participation, democracy, that we can build that movement and that program. So let's go for it. Brilliant,
Clara. Well, we're going to follow you dead close, and we'll be sharing everything that it does, and the podcast itself will be involved, and we'll spread the message. So thanks a lot for coming on the show, and good luck, and hope to speak to you again soon now. Okay, so see you later. Bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye, Rob. Bye.
Bye. Okay, let's take ourselves up to the space station and see if our Paul is up there. Are you there, Paul? Are we making contact?
Rob, I can hear you loud and clear.
Hey, man.
How you doing? Yeah, unexpected show again. We've had to reorganise the show out of the blue because of this new thing that's happened.
Yep. Well, it's good sometimes to do specials when there's something interesting to report.
Yeah.
So
I've heard it. I've heard about the declaration and the trade union work she's doing to protect the workers' rights. What are you thinking about what you're hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was important that we highlighted this declaration. I mean, it's a declaration between unions in England, France, and Italy, and that that's not always the case. The unions don't often organise or make declarations international, and I think it's very important because the attacks that are taking place in arts and culture sector at the moment are quite devastating. We reported on the Tate Gallery strike, and we'll report on other struggles that take place in the arts and culture sector, and it is important because this is we're now entering an economic virus alongside the actual pandemic that's going on, and it's devastating the arts and culture sector. So I think a declaration like this, which is, if you like, it's a bit of a declaration of war against austerity and cutting back on people's jobs. And what I found inspiring about this is it wasn't just about defending workers' rights, and that was central to the question, because lots of people are losing their jobs in museums and these kind of places at the moment. But this declaration is broadening it out, and it's broadening out the question of arts in society, and also being against the logic of capitalism in the arts. And I think all those things are what this show is about. It's about what we talk about week in, week out, with different guests in different ways. But this is like, if you like, the sharp end. This is the struggle part of the class struggle that we talk about on the show. And I think it's an important declaration for us to wave in the air and to say to people, hey, look at this. Are there others that can come on board? Can we organise more?
And I was interested in that bit in the interview when you started going down that road, because I know it's a passion of yours that there should be some sort of a kind of coming together of artists. Yeah.
I mean, this is definitely one that it rings my bell, doesn't it? I mean, I talked to her, I think, afterwards about this idea of, that we're having the podcast of bringing the artist to the workers' movement and the workers' movement to the artist, because that is important, but also that we do need to get organised in society to defend the basic rights of art. And she talks about that, which I think it's in the declaration. People can read the declaration, they should read it, and it talks about the democratic access to the arts, and that's dead important for working class people. It was important for us when we were young, to have access to the rehearsal studios and those kind of places, and these places are being shut down because of a virus that will eventually go. What happens after the virus goes? We're gonna have a real dent in our arts and culture sector. So I think it's one that definitely rings my bell, but there's also something broader here, which I think is important, and that is this is going to be a general fight against people losing their jobs and their homes and their livelihoods on the basis of how a social system of capitalism organizes itself. That why is it that people have to lose their jobs? Why can't people stay on furlough? Why is the logic of capitalism so devastating to people's livelihoods? So yeah, it's good. I think it needs to go further though, and I think maybe near the end of the chat with her, I was trying to develop those points, because I think it's great that 3 trade unions and internationally put a declaration together, and they talk about arts in a wider sense, and they talk about spreading it. What I came in with, okay, how do we link up with those communities? How do we link up with the communities? How do we make people, in the local areas realize that the arts are important? Obviously, people know it. How do we organize as artists? What's our role in this? And for me, this, I think why I think it's important for us to do a special show, because this is a potential possibility of building a backbone to a broader campaign that fights for the arts and culture, but also is against any sort of austerity that comes in the aftermath of this pandemic and the economic crisis that actually was on the cards before the pandemic. And I think lots of people don't get that. They call it, the coronavirus crisis, and that's what's caused this. No, this was a system problem of capitalism that was going to have a crisis anyway, but particularly in the arts and culture, the COVID has had a devastating effect. And I think for all those reasons, it's important that we put our shoulder to the wheel, if you like, in this show for calls like this. Who knows? It maybe doesn't go very far, but for me, I think it's an opportunity. And people listening, I think, well, come on, let's get organised, people. Let's put together some sort of structures. Let's put together a program and a strategy. And it's one of the things this show talks about week in, week out, about how do we do that. And so, yeah, it rings my bell, Paul, because, as an artist, my livelihood has been crushed in this pandemic. But the question, and this is the key point for me, before this crisis, artists were precarious workers. Before this crisis, art was the first thing to be cut from council budgets and local, and funding and these type of things. So if it's going to be cut even more, there will be nothing left, and we're fighting for a better society, and a society without art, well, I'll let people think, that's not something we want.
Yeah, I'm personally very concerned because I mean, obviously, at least in terms of what can actually be done practically, although obviously I think there is room for mobilisation of people in the arts and the attendant jobs that go along with that. And as you've pointed out before, a lot of those people are usually artists themselves who are keeping themselves afloat by working in, say, the bookshops of an art gallery and so forth. But basically, my personal concern is that it took a lot for us to get art to where it is and where it's been throughout the 20th century. And I, as a pro-conspiracy theorist thinking person, I in my very slightly fantastical paranoia, see a gentrification of the arts here and pushing back everything that's been achieved several hundred years, so that after this pandemic, whatever society is going to look like, and I don't think it's going to resemble the society we had as much as we would like afterwards, are we going back to a state when the enjoyment of the arts is the privilege of the rich? That's my concern.
Yes, I think that is one of the bells that needs ringing here. That, art is actually generated by, ordinary people, and there is a problem to access with the art. There is a problem to who's entitled to be, in the activity of producing art. And I think, that is something that needs defending, something that needs fighting for, because what kind of world do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a world where you can't be an artist, where music isn't part of life? These are the kind of things we've kind of got to, we've got to worry about. So well, I think we're gonna follow this decoration. Let's see if it goes somewhere, and basically appeal to people to read it, share it, but more importantly, I think this is a bit of a call to action. I think that's an important side of this, and artists. We are organised, but we're divided in many ways into different places, and we're not pulling it together. And I think,
I want to say this. I mean, if there's nothing else that can be done right now, because of course she's doing trade action union at the moment, trade union action at the moment, and mobilisation is a big task that we're still working out how that could possibly happen. But at the very least, let's have the conversation. Let's put the flare up. Our show is doing its tiny part in that, but at least we're doing it. Let's at least start the discussion, because out of all the balls that are in the air right now, this one isn't getting the attention it deserves, and I'm hoping that maybe some people could share this podcast and the headline with it, and just try and get this around. Share it on Facebook, share it on Instagram, share it on Twitter. Draw attention to this issue, because here it is in a nutshell, like one of the attempts to get this up out there, this flare up in the air. People can see it from a long way away.
Agreed. Okay, thanks very much, Paul. I think we'll be back on Saturday with our normal show, and I'll catch you then. All right, mate. You take care up there.
Cheerio, mate. I will do.
Thank you, Clara, for being our guest this week and sharing some insights on your struggle. We are now playing a song by Claire Laker-Mansfield called Bread and Roses. Enjoy, and don't forget to tune back in on Saturday.
As we go marching, marching in the beauty of the day, 1,000 darkened kitchens, 1,000 meal loaves grey are touched with all the radiance that the sudden sun exposes. The people they are singing, give us bread and give us roses. As we go marching, marching, we battle too for men, for they are women's children, and we mother them again. Our lives will not be sweated from our birth until life's closing. Hearts starve as well as bodies. Give us bread and give us roses. As we go marching, marching, unnumbered women dead come crying through the city, their ancient cry for bread, small art and love and beauty, their tired spirits new. Yes, it is bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too. As we go marching, marching, we bring the greater days. The rising of the women means the rising of the race. No more the drudge and idler, 10 who toil while one reposes, but a sharing of life's glories, bread and roses, bread and roses.
We hope you enjoyed the show. If you have something to say to us, then join our Facebook group or contact us at outaspace.com. That's outa-space.com. See you soon!